Okay, I think with that we can get started. It's 12 p.m. EDT. A hearty welcome to everyone who's joining us for today's panel discussion, Meet the New Press, a discussion with Central European University Press, Edinburgh University Press, and Lynne Rienner Publishers. Before I introduce our moderator for today, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules. Today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share with you a link after the event is complete, and you are welcome to revisit the content yourself and share it amongst your colleagues. We also invite your comments and questions. Please have a look at the Q&A box on your screen, and if you think of a question for the speakers at any point, please feel free to type it in there, and please let us know where you are from. I will either pose it to our speaker at the time the question is raised, or I will hold it for the very end of the discussion at the Q&A session. And with that, I'd like to introduce you all to today's moderator, Steve Fallon. Steve Fallon is the VP of Americas and Strategic Partnerships at the Gruyter Publishers. Steve, with that, I'd like to hand it over to you. The floor is all yours.
Great, thanks, Anne, and welcome everyone to the fourth installment of our Meet the Press webinars. We're excited you could join us today for a casual discussion with three of our press partners. Each press will provide an overview followed by a Q&A exchange at the end of our session today. While this is our fourth webinar, there are many firsts worth noting. First is the title. This title is Meet the New Press. And what do we mean by new? Well, for those of you that don't already know, the Gruyter provides hosting and global distribution services for academic publishers that cannot deliver these services themselves. The Gruyter is not a traditional aggregator. We are a scholarly publishing house, first and foremost, of over 1,600 books a year. And as a scholarly publisher, we recognize the importance and the impact of independent representation in the marketplace. Our partner program tries to replicate this independent approach as a service and to provide individual representation on behalf of our partners through our University Press library product. With us today are three of our newest partners, two European university presses, Central European University Press, and our first UK press, Edinburgh University Press, as well as an independent press, Lynne Rienner Publishers. Another first we should recognize today is that this is our first all-women panel of press leaders, and I'm the lucky one that has the privilege to moderate. I mentioned earlier that the Gruyter provides as a service to our partners that cannot provide these services themselves. And one of the challenges for our partners that rely on third parties for hosting and distribution services is that they are removed from that direct engagement with libraries. If you work in collections or acquisitions, chances are you know the representatives from Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, or Duke University Press. And this session gives a chance for the Gruyter, as that third party, to get out of the way so the presses and the libraries can engage directly with each other. And with that, please let me introduce the panelists in order of speaking with you today. First is Francis Pinter. Francis is the Executive Chairman of the Central European University Press. Francis will provide a background on CEUP, followed by two new University Press directors, Emily Poznansky, Director of Central European University Press, who will talk about the press's future, and Nicola Ramsey, Director of Edinburgh University Press, who will provide a press overview. And then Lynne Rienner, Founder and President of Lynne Rienner Publishers. And with that, Francis, would you like to start?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve. Well, it's really nice to be here with all of you. CEU Press is a small press with a very big mission. There are constants to our mission, but there are also adaptations as we move forward with the times. I was fortunate enough to be invited to set up the CEU Press nearly 30 years ago when George Soros established the Central European University and thought he should have a press. Its first book was published in 1993, and it was called The Privatization Process in Central Europe by Roman Friedman and Andrzej Rapaczynski, both Polish emigres who'd settled in the US and were academics at NYU and Columbia. That first book won a Choice Outstanding Academic Book of the Year award, a nice way for a small press to begin, isn't it? We've won many awards since then. In the spring of 2022, we'll be publishing our 500th title. We are the leading English language university press dedicated to research connected to and or coming out of Central and Eastern Europe with its distinctive regional flavor, and more. Many of these books were written by scholars and practitioners who brought about the changes in the fledgling democracies. And now these books are indispensable historical source books. In spring 2020, the majority of our digitally available books went open for the first few months of the pandemic. And 7 out of the 10 most downloaded books were over 10 years old. As a collection, it forms a unique resource for teaching, learning, and research. But we haven't shied away from tackling wider issues either. The most downloaded title of ours in China is called Academic Freedom. Our author base is international. Only 20% of our output is from CEU authors. We're the only university press operating out of the region exclusively in the English language with a global reach. And so the 500 titles form a unique collection that, like a good wine, matures with age. The university itself has grown from its regional roots to become a truly global institution with students from over 110 countries and faculty from more than 50, enabling an extraordinary exchange of perspectives. The diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda is not new to the CEU. And we've got a new rector, Lynne Rienner, the first woman and the first person to be rector from the global south at the CEU. The university and the press sit at the crossroads between East and West, and more recently, sadly, in the firing line. The values of open society, the rule of law, so on, were so antithetical to the current Hungarian prime minister that he engineered legislation that made it illegal for the CEU to issue degrees in Hungary, where we're based. So all teaching and most research moved to Vienna. Many non-teaching functions remain in Budapest, including a fabulous library and an award-winning new building in the center of the city. The press now has 2 bases, one in Budapest with long-serving staff, and the other in Vienna as part of the CEU's commitment. Sorry about that. So we are now also in Vienna as part of the CEU's commitment to one CEU in 2 locations. Our resolve to publish relevant and important works has only been strengthened by this challenge. And so I'm now going to hand over to Emily, who's going to be telling you about what she's doing at the press. Emily.
Thank you, Frances. Okay, so the press's expansion is supported financially by the university, which shows its commitment to what we do, but we are still very small. We have 10 functional positions filled by 7 FTE, so we manage our resources very carefully. We currently publish between 25 to 30 books a year, and we have added to our commissioning capacity to double that in the next 2-3 years. Academic publishing, as we know, is in flux, and for a small press to keep up with the rate of change, we need to choose the right partners to work with externally, be it for production, sales, or digital. We are really happy about the opportunity to work with the Gruyter, to have a sales representation for our full title list, and also to be one among a fantastic group of presses. So our partnership with the Gruyter includes the digitization of the final 100 titles that were previously unavailable electronically, making the full 500 titles available as ebooks. This includes important works like the Cold War Reader, which resulted from a partnership with the US National Archives. We also have series dedicated to gender, identity, and minorities, and others like the history of public health, as well as medieval documents of our region in their original language and parallel English translations. Alongside this research, we also have the CEU Classic series, which is a nice one. It brings out the best works of the 19th and early 20th century literature from the region. These are English translations, in English translation for the first time, with the aim to inspire new ideas across readers globally. So the press is almost entirely reliant on library sales for its sustainability. Our print sales are 40% in the US and 60% in the rest of the world, and we offer digital and print versions simultaneously. Like other presses, we have seen the growth of e-sales over the last few years. Going forward, we will continue to focus on the importance of curating, validating, and disseminating research. And we will continue to maintain our high quality of production and review while aiming to speed up the delivery of content. In the area of open access, CEU Press has been very active, and we partnered with COPIM, which is a Research England and Arcadia funded initiative. We developed an equitable open access model for books that removes author-facing fees to allow all authors from all over the world to publish with us in open access in a non-BPC model. This model is called Opening the Future, and it's designed for small to medium-sized presses that have a substantial backlist. It combines membership and subscription models to allow all librarians to participate. Next week, we'll announce our first book published in open access under this model, and we're thrilled about it. That's Tamas Kamusalla's Words in Space and Time, which is a historical atlas coming out of the region. So you may wonder how we can offer our complete list with the Gruyter and be transforming our monograph front list into open access at the same time. So as CEU Press increases the number of open access monographs in the front list, the price of the front list package with the Gruyter will be reduced proportionally. So this partnership will support our transition as it takes more than just funding individual books to transition an entire press into open access. Over the next few years, CEU Press will still need to reinvest new income, like that raised through the Gruyter, to support our growth. So we want to diversify, and we want to bring out a series of short books, one of which will deal with, oh, there's a bit of an echo. It's maybe gone now. That will deal with the global issues of today, and it will have a special relevance for teaching. We'll also be launching the CEU Review of Books, which will be a new platform, which will review the important books coming out of our region. Its distinctive USP is that it will also review books written in local languages, and those reviews will be in English. And we've also created a library advisory board with members from around the world to help guide us as we grow over the next few years. And with that, I'll hand over to the next press, or to Steve, I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Nicola?
Oh, yes, hello everyone. Nice to be here today. I'll start with a brief history of Edinburgh University Press. We were founded in 1949 as a department of the University of Edinburgh, which I'm sure you will all know is one of Britain's oldest and most distinguished centres of learning. We're the only university press in Scotland, and we're the third largest by turnover in the UK after Oxford and Cambridge. Our status has evolved over the years, and in 2001 we became a limited company with charitable status, sitting as a wholly owned subsidiary of the university, and we sit within the corporate services group, which I think speaks to the kind of the balance that we hold there. So we're seen as a commercial entity, but we have a mission focus, and that can be a fine line to tread. We receive no direct funding from the university, though we do benefit greatly from their expert advice via our trustees and also our press committee, who approve or otherwise every book, series and journal that we want to publish. This means we're required to cover our costs through sales and return a surplus in order to ensure our sustainability, to allow us to invest in the business, and crucially to enable us to deliver on our mission of serving our academic community. Last year, our turnover exceeded £4 million for the first time. That's about $5.5 million. And growth has come primarily through investment in our commissioning teams and also our sales team, and also with the acquisition of a couple of small Scots law presses. The transition from print to digital sales has probably been one of the most significant changes that we've seen as a business in recent times. And that's why the Gruyter partnership is really so very important to us. And we also really like the opportunities this partnership provides to connect with you, librarians, as our key customers, and better understanding what you need will help to inform our strategic plans. Thinking about EUP's mission and focus, we publish in the arts, humanities and social sciences, and our programme is made up primarily of research monographs, although we do also publish some works of reference, a small number of textbooks and critical editions, and a handful of trade non-fiction titles. We focus on 9 subject areas with a strategic aim to build strength in depth, developing a reputation in each of these areas as a publisher of world-class research, selecting books written by authors from around the world, which are engaging, well-written, and encourage critical thinking. And those subject areas are classics and ancient history, film studies, Islamic and Middle Eastern studies, language and linguistics, law, literary studies, philosophy, politics, and last but not least, as far as we are concerned, Scottish studies. I was asked to pull out some highlights, which is hard because it's a bit like having a favourite child, and we all know that's not okay. But it is easy for me to tell you a bit about our wonderful Islamic and Middle Eastern studies list. I should declare a bias. I was the publisher on that list for about 20 years up until this summer when I became chief exec. So I can tell you about some of the amazing authors we've published on that list, who are world-renowned experts in their field. They include Carol Hillenbrand from Edinburgh, going back to her groundbreaking book on the Crusades, Muslim Perspectives, and right up to her very recently published trilogy of collected essays. And at the other end, very new to the list, Nasser Rabat from MIT, who will be publishing his biography of al-Makrizi, Egypt's greatest historian, next year. I can also tell you about a recent highlight from our literature list, Living with Shakespeare by Geoffrey Marsh, which tells the story of St Helens Parish in London, where Shakespeare lived in the 1590s, so whilst he was writing Romeo and Juliet and Midsummer Night's Dreams. And it's a brilliant example of how what on the face of it might seem quite a dry set of data, in this case parish records, can actually bring to life not only the world of Shakespeare, but also his neighbours, who here included a bewitched girl who vomited pins and whose father, who was a priest, had killed 2 men during a football match a few years earlier. So this really is an important but also a fun book. I could go on, but I'll close this section with just one more thing, which is from our film studies programme, Columbo, Paying Attention 24/7. And I'm hoping my pun hasn't been lost on at least the fans of the great man himself. Back to more prosaic matters and some stats. We publish around 250 new books each year, with the largest numbers coming from our film, Islamic and Middle Eastern studies and literary studies lists, although we are seeing significant growth in our other areas, including politics and classics and ancient history. We also have a portfolio of over 50 journals, again in the arts, humanities and social sciences. Across books and journals, we have a team of 40 people working in editorial, production, marketing, sales and finance. We use experienced UK-based freelance copy editors who work closely with our in-house production team to ensure every book is produced to the highest standard. And we have a strong focus on author care at every step on the journey, which means we get lots of repeat authors, which we think is a good measure of success in this area. Thinking about our business, proportion of sales. So the USA and Canada sees about 36% of our book sales, but interestingly, there's a sort of a slight split between print and ebook there. So it accounts for 33% of our print sales, but 41% of our ebook sales. And in terms of the overall split between print and ebook, we're sitting at about 60-40 in favour of print at the moment. We were thinking about our academic libraries and what proportion of our sales are going there. Is really hard to say precisely, partly because a lot of those print sales go through wholesalers and because several ebook aggregators don't break down sales by customer in this way, which we find frustrating. However, we do know that academic libraries are our biggest customer by some way, and therefore any significant changes here in terms of budget reductions, buying patterns, spending a larger proportion of budget on journals or diverting funds to read and publishing deals, for example, will have an impact on our sustainability. In terms of COVID and how that impacted our business, I think the same will be true of all academic publishers. It was really that acceleration of the transition from print to digital. So if we track this over the last 5 years, we saw ebook sales accounting for about 22% of our book revenue in 2018, 24% in 2019, 28% in 2020, And then COVID hits and it goes to 37% in 2021, and we're forecasting 41% this year. And that's okay, in that all of our books are available digitally. However, we aren't necessarily seeing the increase in ebook sales completely replace what we're losing in print sales. And that obviously is a challenge for us. And last, I just wanted to say something about our author numbers and our author base. So I mentioned earlier that we do aim to publish books by authors from a global base. And based on books signed last year, we saw 28% of our authors coming from the USA and Canada, 57% from the UK and Europe, and 15% from the rest of the world. And this speaks to a drive among our commissioning editors to diversify the range of voices on our lists, to introduce new perspectives, and to ensure there is an equality of opportunity to publish for academics from a global base. And related to this, we're exploring the creation of a Developing Countries Initiatives Fund that would support open access publishing for authors from countries classified as low to middle income economies by the World Bank. And just to conclude on the subject of open access, we work with Knowledge Unlatched, and we also fund 2 platinum open access series. There's one in film studies called Visionaries, which is about female film directors, and another series on Edinburgh studies in urban political economy, as well as offering a gold open access option to all authors. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And next is Lynne Rienner.
Good morning, afternoon. No, I guess not morning, afternoon, evening. So Lynne Rienner Publishers was founded in 1984. One question I get asked a lot is, why did you start your company, or how did you start your company? The simple answer is, I got fired. I was working for Westview Press, where I had the opportunity from when it was 4 people to when it was 100 people to learn all the bits of publishing. And then we had a difference of opinion about what kind of publisher we wanted to be. And I was asked to leave, which turned out to be a good thing. And we were founded with an idea that people said couldn't happen, which is another reason I started this company. When somebody tells you you can't, of course, we all say, yes, I can. So the idea was to combine the quality level, the peer review, the attention to the quality of every chapter of a university press. Yes, we're sort of a university press wannabe, with the necessary efficiencies of an independent publisher. We thought of ourselves as global in reach from the very beginning. An early partnership, in fact, was with Frances Pinter and her company, and they helped us a lot with our international distribution in the early years. We focused from the very beginning on the social sciences, international relations, comparative politics, sociology, criminology, women's studies. We moved into US politics as well. We do not do books in the behavioral sciences or science and technology. We have done some literature in translation, but really more as an adjunct to support people who are doing work on Africa or Latin America, Middle East. So that was back in 1984. And now here we are today. We have a staff of 11. We publish, depending on the year, between 30 books and 50 books a year. At the moment, it's more toward the lower end. We have, I think, some strengths. Because we're independent, we have to be nimble, which helps when you're suddenly confronted with COVID. We have a terrific staff. I think we combine a certain element of courageousness or adventurousness, if that's a word, in terms of some of the books that we publish. But we're also very cautious because we don't have any backup. I mean, it's us, we have no university behind us. Thinking about some of the statistics that the others have shared with you, our domestic sales are about 80%. and then export sales are about 20%. As Nicola mentioned, it's really difficult to be accurate with that number because we sell to library suppliers and we don't know where all of those books end up. Print versus digital has shifted greatly, of course, the last 18 months. Before then, we were 90% print, 10% digital. Our print sales were relatively strong. That has switched in the past year. When I say the past year, our year ends September 30, so those are the numbers I was looking at. That switched to 70% print, 30% digital. But that's a little bit misleading because it's not the same if we're talking about scholarly monographs versus books that are used by students. We do publish a few textbooks, but a lot of books that are used in classes. They're not actually textbooks. And we have found that students still prefer print unless they can get digital at no cost. So in this last year, I would say it's the scholarly monographs going to libraries, the digital would be more like 50%. But overall, it's, as I say, it's about 30%. Our sales to academic libraries have been, I'm sure this is true for everyone, dramatically affected by COVID. Before that, 50 to 60% of our books were going to academic libraries. In this past year, it was 23%, which is a frightening number to me for two reasons. One, of course, is it threatens our business. And also because I worry about the material that's going to get lost. I don't know whether librarians are going to be able to go back and collect books that they weren't able to collect during the worst of the pandemic. And if that material is lost, it's lost for good. I think about, the endangered species that or some little flower in the Amazon could be the source of a cure for a disease, but once it's extinct, it's not possible anymore. And also, our authors, I feel that, their work is not going to, the books published in the last 18 months, what is going to happen to their work? So that is something that is on my mind a lot. And I do wonder if I could ask a librarian a question, the first question would be, are you going to go back and look at the period, where you weren't really very active? One other fact that I find interesting is that Amazon accounted for 28% of our sales last year. Thinking about the relationship between my company and libraries, again, libraries are our lifeblood, and I love that de Gruyter is arranging these interactions because a source of sadness to me really over the years has been the minimal nature of the relationship between librarians and scholarly publishers. I feel like we're so intertwined that it would be great if we could communicate more. I remember libraries were important to me, but librarians were equally important to me and helped me through some really difficult childhood years. And I remember the very first book that I checked out of a library when I was 5, East of the Sun and West of the Moon and Other Fairy Tales, should anyone be interested. Librarians guided me in so many ways through high school even. So I'm glad to be part of this. I think I'm going to stop now. So.
Yeah, well, that was great. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for providing that overview. Lynn had the question for the librarians that are here about going back, and so if you get a chance to provide some commentary in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. It would be good to get your feedback. Then I'll start with you because you raised a point when I was writing down the numbers here that you started out, or your business traditionally was 90% in print and 10% digital, and then how that's shifted due to COVID. And then there's also part of that shift to being closer to 70-30%. And then following my math, you then talked about how the percentage of academic library contributions were between 50 and 60% and how traditionally, and then how that's been reduced now to about 23%. Do you think that they're connected, this idea that that the move from print to digital and the decrease in revenue from academic libraries is connected due to your ability to have content online via aggregators? What makes you kind of reconcile that that decrease in revenue throughout over the last couple of years?
Well, our books have been available digitally for some years. I mean, everything that we publish is available both, unless there's a rights issue or it's a core textbook, that they've all been available digitally. I attribute the decrease in revenue from libraries really to more about library budgets than the nature of the books. I mean, one concern I have is that the libraries, in my understanding, they're expensive journals that they have to collect, and then there are platforms of the 3 to 5 big guys that take up a whole big chunk of library budgets. And then when CEU Press or Edinburgh Press has these individual monographs, there's not much left in the library budget to collect those. So I think that that's been a factor, but I think it's library budgets more than anything else. That's my sense.
And then let me ask, Emily at CEUP, are you seeing some of the same trends? I guess first, if you mind asking, what percentage of your business is print and digital? And prior to the pandemic and then through the pandemic, have those trends continued or have they changed?
We've it's not dissimilar. So we've seen like decline in print, and that's shifting over to e. But maybe what's different with us is that we've been really growing our open access business. So that's growing quite well. And so if I count open access and digital, that's about 40%, and we expect that to keep growing over the next years.
Nicola, what about with Edinburgh?
Yeah, well, as noted, I mean, we did sort of see that real kind of dramatic switch at that point. It was something that was happening anyway, and suddenly bam, that such strong demand for digital. We'd made a lot of our books open access, as many academic publishers did in those first few months of the pandemic, and we did then sort of see sales coming off the back of that. And another thing that we're seeing, another sort of strange, I don't know, it's a strange effect, is what's happening to our front list. So we would expect, in the more traditional print market, you publish a monograph, and the vast majority of the sales are probably in months 1, 2, and 3. And we're not seeing that anymore because the first sales are probably going to be digital, and the sales might happen early on in their book's life, but because of the way aggregators report and pass through the funds, we don't see that as a sale until much later on. And then the print sale might come later because the books are available digitally, academics find them, they're then asking their libraries to buy them in print. So it's kind of really shifting when our sales are happening, and that's sort of another really unusual element that we've not had to deal with before, and we've always been used to kind of measuring success by books on our front list, and now we're having to watch that over a much longer period of time, and those sales are coming through in what certainly appears to be a much slower flow.
I take it, if I stay with you a moment, you mentioned some of the frustration about being unaware of where the actual channels, some of your revenue is coming through, whether you face that both digitally as well as electronically, same issues?
Well, it's primarily through, the two things. So I suppose on the print side, it's because it's going through wholesalers, so we're not then seeing the end users in most cases. And then on the other side, on the digital side, it's absolutely because of, every aggregator presents their information a little bit differently. So we're dealing with a lot of data coming in, and making sense of it from each aggregator is quite challenging. And then pulling it all together to form an overall picture is a whole other level of challenge. And I think particularly for smaller publishers who perhaps don't have the infrastructure and systems and resources in place to have people working on this. So it's something that our colleagues in finance and sales that are grappling with all the time. And we're making progress, but it involves a lot of effort to be able to understand where those books are going, so we can understand who our customers are and respond to their needs.
Each of you touched on sustainability at one point or another. Nicola, you mentioned some of the challenges you're having with your front list. Lynn, you talked about the decline in revenue from academic libraries. Emily, you discussed the need to diversify and efforts to sustain your current program, as well as trying to grow your program. You mentioned doubling or tripling in size in the years to come. When we talk about sustainability, if we're honest, what we think about the Gruyter partnership is this is where we try to represent you individually in the marketplace, direct with academic libraries to provide some of that sustainable revenue streams through frontlist acquisitions. It's not that dissimilar from what you might see from commercial publishers and how they work with academic libraries. So my question when it comes to sustainability is Lynn, you mentioned that you do not have a backup. Nicola, I'll start with you. How does the press maintain itself? Endowments, university support, subventions,
book sales. That's really it. As I say, we get support in kind from the university, but yeah, we're paying all our bills, including we're not in university accommodation, so it's we have to be self-supporting, and so that is through selling our content, our books, and our journals. There are small amounts of funding that come in for particular projects, but generally speaking, yeah, we have to make sure that we balance the books by making sure that we're kind of commissioning the right books that the market wants, and then making sure that we're reaching that market. So there isn't a safety net.
Emily, what about CEUP?
Well, we're on the smaller side of university presses, so we do rely on a university subsidy and sales. So those are our two sort of revenues, if you like. But as we grow, the aim is to reduce the reliance on the university. So that's the plan over the next few years for the press.
Francis, we've talked on the topic of sustainability. Looking ahead, you've worked in the university press space for a long time. What are your concerns about sustainability as we think about the future, and what would be your areas of focus?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is going to be to balance the risk a bit more. As Nicola was saying, the sales of books are coming in later and later, and I'm not sure whether that can be redressed quickly enough for some people. But we had in the past, and Lynn will remember those days when we knew that the advance orders on the approval plans were sufficient to pay for our fixed costs. Well, that's no longer the case. And so we have to find the finance to bridge that if these sales are happening later in the life cycle of the book. I guess for us in particular, it means diversifying a bit in terms of the content type, and we will be looking to increase the non-monograph side of things if we can, just a little bit, just to get that balance right.
Lynn, would you like to comment on the future?
Well, I mean, I can second what others have said. I mean, book sales is what we really rely on. We do get occasional subsidies, usually in the form of a guaranteed purchase. And of course, we love that kind of thing because it gets books. Those books typically go to an audience that we would not be able to reach otherwise. Distribution in a developing country, for example, distribution to aid workers. We're doing a book on for, it's like the Young Black Leaders Guide to, I can't remember the title, it's like a trollopy entitled, but Guide to Pursuing a Career in International Affairs, what the giants want you to know. And there's a grant from a foundation so that those books can get distributed to young people. I mean, so those kinds of things we love because the books are getting to a wider audience and because it gives us some financial support. But beyond that, there is this constant balancing act. On the one hand, you have a book that might be a Choice Outstanding Academic Award. Like we once published a book called Indigenous Entrepreneurs in Côte d'Ivoire. That really is the title. It sold probably, even back in the days that Francis is talking about, where the approval plan orders were enough to pay the print bill. That book did not make it. But at the same time, that book is public. We do a lot on Africa, for example. So over here, we have Understanding Contemporary Africa that sells many thousands of copies. So we publish this book here to support this book here. But the balancing act, and I think this is true for all of us, is just getting more and more difficult. And it also means that the prices are getting pushed higher, which is nothing new. I mean, this is something that I spoke about at a conference 15 years ago. We sell fewer copies, so we raise the price a bit because we still have the same fixed costs. And then we sell fewer copies more because the prices are higher. So then we raise the prices. This upward spiral is, again, that's another concern. Where is that going to end? Are we going to end up publishing one copy of a book, at a ridiculous price that then all the libraries will have, through a digital sharing platform? I'm convinced that there's a solution to this problem if we could all put our heads together. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, and thanks for raising that. I think when we think about this topic, and I think our partnership with the presses comes down to this idea of sustainability, and there's what's interesting is what CEUP is doing, both partnering with the Gruyter, but then also having their own initiative direct with academic libraries, which is kind of the same thing, right? At this idea of making an annual contribution to become more sustainable. The balancing act that you discussed between balancing, titles that perform well in the marketplace with titles that are more niche. We're starting to talk about that in demand-driven environments. How does that book that you mentioned, and forgive me for not being able to repeat the name, but I think it's understandable that this is a mission-driven scholarly monograph that now, as libraries are moving more toward digital, and if we stick with LRP for a second, you're publishing this book, this niche area book that's important, that's mission-driven. This book then does not have the benefit of the approval plans and now is reliant in a digital marketplace. That marketplace was filled with aggregators that have various models between single title sales and demand-driven revenue, which is becoming more and more prevalent. How does a title like that survive in a demand-driven environment with a lot of other commercial presses? And so the future of the mission-driven scholarly monograph, which is, I think, also what you're pointing to, comes into question. And there are ways to offset that. I think what CEUP is trying to do is trying to bridge to that point with getting annual contributions from university presses. Emily, is that about right? Is that what you guys are trying to do when we're thinking about that mission-driven scholarly monograph?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, during the pandemic, we, like a lot of publishers, we opened up our content on several platforms, and the usage just went through the roof, and in countries that we haven't sold to before. And yeah, some of our oldest titles were the ones that were used the most. So we saw all these trends that I think we may have expected, but this was happening live. And it was a real sort of wake-up call that moving our content into OA has clear benefits. So this model was developed, Opening the Future, and Francis can talk much more about that, but maybe not for today as we focus on the Gruyter. But the aim is to gradually move the press into open access. It isn't an all or nothing model. We're going to do that gradually, and during that transition, we're also looking to grow our content, improve our infrastructures, improve our lots of things internally. The partnership with the Gruyter is a great match because for the first time, we're going to have full representation of our title list, which we haven't had before. So as a very small press, without a sales team and without much of a marketing team, that's a new thing for us. So we're really excited about that. But yeah, it's going to be a mix of things. And I think that's what a lot of presses are thinking too, that diversity is needed now. And I think it does bring complexity in. And I think that's the balancing act. So what do you do internally versus through partnerships? So.
Can I just add a little comment to that to answer Steve's question? If we try to live in a just in time and never any just in case world, it'll be the death of monographs. Because if you look at how monographs are used, their life cycles, they get a bit of publicity when they're published and a few copies get sold. Then there's waiting for the traditional reviews, which come out 2 to 3 years later. Then there's another spike. And then only after another few years, like 5 years, does that book come into its own, being cited by other writers. So you've got these 3 phases. And if libraries don't support the quality presses in ways like through the De Gruyter scheme, it makes it very difficult to finance those books until they bring a return, which is over several years. So I mean, I think that you kind of alluded to that, Steve.
Could I also chime in here? And yeah, yes, absolutely. And even more along those lines, I am always amazed and gratified, especially when I'm in on the weekend. I open the mail and to see what's there. We still do get faxes where we get an order for a book that we published 25 years ago. And that's why we try to keep we keep things in print as long as we possibly can. And I mean, it's wonderful to know that, I mean, somebody came across a reference to something, maybe it was in a bibliography, and it's useful to them. So yes, it is important to, we think anyway, to backlist sales, those 1s and 2s means somebody is finding that valuable. So.
We saw that, and in fact, that was another kind of COVID impact, I suppose, is seeing that kind of really big uptick in backlist sales during that time, and spoken to our US distributor about that, because they've seen that across their publishers, and feeling that there was something around people were reading more, people were going online and looking for themselves, and they were exploring and finding backlist titles that perhaps they wouldn't have been aware of before. I mean, it was quite a phenomenon at the time, and really notable that where, our new books were really struggling, and I share others' concern with the fact that particularly for us, we think those books published kind of from March to July, August 2020, they've not sold, and will they? Are they kind of lost and gone? And that's pretty heartbreaking from the author perspective, really, more than anything else. But at the same time, people were finding backlist, so it's about that kind of digital engagement, isn't it? And for us as publishers, and making sure that every book is as discoverable as it can be, because there are readers out there wanting to find them.
Yeah, I mean, independence. I mean, dependence on backlist print sales for sustainability is something that I think that all publishers rely on, and is also becoming increasingly difficult in an environment again that's moving more from acquisition to demand driven. And that competition for discovery puts more pressures, especially on smaller publishers that have limited resources to invest into enhancing metadata and having an ebook record that can compete with other much larger university presses or even commercial presses is one of those topics that we hope to get into further. Nicola, we had a session with all of our university press partners in September, and we asked them what percentage of their scholarly monographs fail to break even, and what percentage of their scholarly monographs lose revenue. And the majority of our participants said that between 10 and 25% of their monographs fail to break even. Mind me asking, for Edinburgh University Press, would you be in that same range? Would you expect it to be higher?
Yeah, do you know, we don't do that kind of I don't know, the finger of shame, I suppose, and look at it sort of on a title by title basis. We understand what our average sales are, and we look at that by list and by book type and so on. So we get a clear understanding of certain subject areas kind of, you know, performing better when we look at a combination of print and digital sales and over a 3-year time period. But it would not surprise me at all to discover that it was within that range, and I think that's always the case, isn't it? And I think somebody else has said this earlier. You have some books that are really big successes, and they support the ones that are important but are much more niche, and we feel, you know, sort of from a mission perspective, they ought to be published and they ought to be out there, but they are probably not going to get that market. But on the other hand, and this is why publishing is such a fantastic business to be in, there are always surprises. So sometimes there can be a disappointment, something that you thought would do fantastically well doesn't. But even more, it's the ones that you thought, oh, well, this is important, but I'm not sure. And then, you know, it goes out and exceeds everyone's expectations. And those are the wins that we like to focus on when we can.
Yeah, one could argue that's the benefit of a digital environment and discoverability, is that you just don't know what's important, as Lynn mentioned in the book from 25 years ago that was somehow discovered and someone wanted to acquire. That's the benefit of this environment. Then you mentioned, you know, the niche, the title that you mentioned. What do you think is, you know, all of you are publishers, and I guess, you know, we have this fundamental challenge with that mission-driven scholarly monograph. What do you see as the future of these mission-driven monographs? Will you start to make business decisions about whether or not to publish a book based on this environment?
Was that directed at me? Sorry.
Yeah. Start with you, please.
Well, clearly we talk about it. It's what we do. It's who we are. So we don't want to stop doing what we're doing. When we make a decision about whether to publish a book, there are primarily 2 factors. Is it good enough? And does anyone want it? Yeah. So I would say 50% of our books do not cover their costs, because we do all of our copy editing, proofreading, all of that. We do all of that in the United States. You know, we don't send it out to lower price countries. So there's a certain amount of cost that's involved before the book ever gets printed. And we know that we're not going to sell enough to do that. So there's an element of faith. I mean, I know in terms of the subjects that we publish, we've held steady on that. And the interest shifts. There are years when there's a lot of interest in Africa. Revolutions and famines always generate desire for books. It's terrible. But, you know, we don't stop publishing books about Latin America because there's no revolution going on in Latin America. So our approach has been that, yes, library sales have been down the last few years, but I do not believe that the world is going to continue in this direction, and that these books are not going to be valued. So as long as in the aggregate, we can manage to be sustainable, we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Nicola, could you comment?
Yeah, I mean, very, very similar, really. And, you know, we consider every book in terms of its academic quality and value, but also its market and how we can publish it. So every book goes through 2 committees. Once it's gone through its whole kind of external review process, we have our press committee, which is academics from the University of Edinburgh representing our subject areas, who interrogate every project from an academic quality perspective. But then we have a publishing committee, which is people from sales and marketing, who are asking those questions and are looking at the financials, and we weigh each of those books in the balance. And sometimes we think, well, the financials aren't brilliant, but there are very important reasons to publish. But in most cases, we're trying to find the books where we can kind of tick both of those boxes, because we have to sustain ourselves by selling books. So we do have to make hard choices.
Emily, with the CEUP, one could argue that you're taking a little bit of a different approach, whereas majority of other university presses rely on traditional sales models for their sustainability of their content. You're trying to shift your monographs to open access, to kind of funding in advance of publication. So my question is that the answer? Is this idea of titles that are unable to break even? We often hear from librarians, well, that these titles should just become open access. I mean, you're doing that, but you've also worked for a commercial publisher as well. What do you see are the benefits and the challenges of the model, like Opening the Future?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the answer to this problem, because what we commission and what we publish doesn't change because we're moving into open access. So it's the same criteria we're looking at. We're looking to fill a gap or introduce a new way of thinking. That's the prime motivation, and and the breadth of the appeal as well. So the market. That's the criteria always. And open access just enables more people to read it. So it's not the reason for publishing something, but it's a way of getting more eyes on it. So it does resolve certain issues, but not, I think, this one that we're describing. Whether it's the answer to the sustainability of monographs, I think that's a big question. And I think the way we're thinking is, STEM is moving into open access. Things are happening more quickly. Research is being read by more, being cited by more people, and the humanities and social sciences shouldn't stay behind because it's working with more traditional models. So it's going to take time, but it can't be left behind. And I think that's what we're looking to develop.
Steve, just to that, and just a comment from one of the chat room comments. It seems that we still have to talk about sustainability, because if we're selling the books, we have revenues from the sales. If the book's going to be open access, the costs don't go down. So there still has to be sustainability of revenue to cover open access. And as one of the commenters pointed out, so individual scholars, how are they supposed to come up with the money to do that? And I'm concerned that it could lead to a sort of ghettoization where you have authors from big schools, big research schools have access to grants, will be able to pay for open access, but people at small schools who might be doing brilliant work don't have that. So you have to sustain open access as well. It's just another sustainability problem, seems to me.
Yeah, Frances, would you like to comment?
Yes. The work has to be paid for. Publishing costs money, and it has to be paid for from somewhere. Now, there are basically the BPC model where authors are being asked to find some money from somewhere, whether it's from inside a research grant or a wealthy institution or whatever, to pay for those costs of book processing charge. And then there's the other routes that are being developed now, which are non-author facing, and that's non-BPC routes, and that is the one of them is what we're doing, another is what MIT is doing, and where I think this has to go in the end will be that libraries will be diverting some of their funds from buying the print book or the ebook to supporting the open access book. And there will be a mixed economy there. There'll still be a need for print books in some cases, and there will be books that are better off if they are open access. And then at a sort of next level down on all of this, there's the issue of actually the open access version can be the marketing tool for the book itself, and people can buy print individually down the line. So a lot to say on that, but we're running out of time and I don't want to hog the time.
Yeah, maybe just to squeeze in one last question from the chat is the expectations around POD. For those of you that had either open access or your books are out of print and have moved to POD channels, maybe just a quick comment on the benefit of doing such. Are you seeing the benefits of moving titles on print sales for open access titles, and are you seeing benefit for titles moved to POD?
We're using POD a lot now. I mean, not even for just for backlist. I mean, so anything really. If backlist titles are generating a certain number of sales, then we'll reprint conventionally. But otherwise, things are going on to sort of managed print. So whatever the print on demand is, the requirements are. And as I say, we're doing that for our front list titles as well. So we're doing really limited print runs of monographs that are expected to cover maybe the first few months of sales, and then they're automatically going on to POD. And that works really well for us, because it means it keeps our stock charges right down. So even though the unit cost is higher, your benefits in not holding on to stock that you may not sell is really helpful, and it's more sustainable from an environmental point of view.
Emily?
That's exactly the same for us. So that's our default now, POD.
Lynne?
Yeah, we don't start with POD. Paperbacks, that's a whole other issue. Even with our monographs, we'll do POD paperbacks for if the class wants to use them. But our initial print run for monographs right now is 200, which is probably too high. But my problem with the POD, in which we do now all the time, is that there's certain things that, quality issues that you can't really do with POD. Like we like our case-bound books to be sewn, not glued, but that's not viable when you're doing 10 copies or 25 copies or 50 copies of a book. So, fortunately, the technology now is such that that you can do a library quality paper cloth bound book with a glued binding. But still, when you're used to the print and you're used to the offset, it's hard to accept the POD hardcovers, but we're doing the same. We're doing it as well.
We've reached the end of our hour, and I don't know about you, but I feel like there's a lot more to get to, and we could easily talk another hour. But first, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for taking time out of your day to engage directly with the library community about each of your presses. It's quite fascinating, and thank you very much. Also, I'd like to thank all of our librarians and all of our attendees for taking time to join us as well. It's worth plugging because it's something that we've been working on. Gruyter is also working on what we're calling the University Press Library Collaborative. And it's an opportunity to bring together for further discussion like-minded individuals. When we think about a lot of the sustainability challenges you heard today from these press partners, as well as the mission-driven scholarly monograph, we're looking to come together. What can we do? Can we bring our heads together? Lynne mentioned earlier, and yes, we're trying to do that. So on January 26th, we will have a session bringing together all of our University Press partners, as well as all of our University Press Library participants. We expect it to be a lot of people to come together and to address these ongoing issues. So for those of you that are partners and for those of you that are participants, we hope that you join us, and we look forward to continuing this discussion further. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.